In this video series, I'm going to show you what full site editing is all about and how to build a block theme. We'll start by building a quick and dirty theme using WordPress's Create Block Theme plugin and the built-in block patterns. When Automatic talks about the simplicity of block themes and how it will compete with things like Wix and Squarespace, this is what they generally have in mind. Of course, this is very limited. It doesn't work well for those of us who are building websites for clients or if we have specific requirements that we need to meet. So the next thing we'll do is to start building a block theme in a way that's more usable for those needs. We'll go through the whole process manually so you can see what's happening under the hood and adapt them to your own projects. We'll begin by creating the skeleton of the theme on a development site, along with a few templates that I think are necessary for most themes. We'll spend some time getting to know and understand theme.json and how that works with your theme settings and for global styling. I'll show you a few ways to package your theme so that you can move it from your development site to your project site, and then I'll show you how and why you probably want to create a child theme. I'll demonstrate a few ways to add a custom post type and taxonomy to your theme, and the pros and cons of each method. And finally, we'll wrap up by creating a few custom blocks that you can use as part of your theme or your page layouts. Now I'm going to stop for a minute to address the elephant in the room. WordPress block themes and full site editing are confusing and polarizing topics for a lot of people. They're being met with a lot of resistance by people who are either clinging to classic themes or who insist on using third-party page builders. See, I bet I pissed people off just by saying that. Well, here's the thing. It's obvious that this is the direction WordPress is headed, so it's at least in your best interest to understand what's going on so that you aren't somebody who only understands how to build using a particular theme or plugin. For the classic theme crowd, the good news is that block themes will be extremely familiar. You can also gradually move to the world of block themes without giving up your PHP templates, the customizer, or the classic menu system. In fact, for those of us who create custom themes for ourselves or our clients, there are very few reasons why we wouldn't want to begin moving toward block themes. As for page builders, nearly every argument I've heard for using them boils down to the developer experience. Think about that for a second. You chose one of the most critical tools that you're layering on top of WordPress because it makes your life easier or more efficient, not because it was in the client's best interest or because it met your project's requirements. You've probably heard or read about the block editor not being able to do X, Y, or Z. And you know what? Statements like that have the ability to both be true and completely misleading at the same time. What those people are actually saying is that the theme they chose or the blocks they're using can't do what they want. The truth is that the block editor is a powerful framework, and you can build nearly anything you want on top of it with very little bit of knowledge and effort. Now, I'll be the first to admit that the block editor is in no way perfect. In fact, it can be downright frustrating. It's a moving target with features getting added haphazardly, the documentation's in shambles, and the user experience is inconsistent at best. Despite all that, though, I think it's worth learning, and the long-term benefits of using it far outweigh the learning curve and frustrations. To keep us focused on the mechanics of theme building, I'm purposely sticking with a very bare bones design. We could spend hours learning the ins and outs of the core blocks and how to wrangle them into a specific design, but that would just distract us from the core of what I'm teaching here. Besides, core blocks are very limited in a lot of ways. Most of us who are building sites with a block editor are using custom blocks or third-party block plugins. I personally recommend a mixture of custom blocks and core blocks. They can be built by hand or with tools like the Pinegrow web editor, which is what I use. The reason I like Pinegrow for custom blocks is because it gives me a visual tool to build them, and it creates a plugin with either React or ACF blocks that can be edited by hand if necessary. Once you build your block plugin, there are no dependencies on Pinegrow and everything is open for you to distribute or modify. So if you want to learn more about it, you can check out some of my other videos where I go into a lot more detail, or you can go to pinegrow.com. Now let's jump over to a development site so we can run through the process of creating a block theme in its most basic form. Here we have a development site running on local WP. I've adjusted a few basic settings like I do on every site, and I've imported some demo data so we can see what it is that we're building. Don't worry about any of this for now. We'll cover it in the next video. Also, don't bother trying to follow along with this one. Just watch so you can get a feel for how all the pieces fit together. As you can see, we've got that demo data loaded here. We've got some demo posts, some demo pages, some media loaded up. And if we look in our reading, we can see that we've got this set as a static page for the front page. And those pages set, home page is called front page and post page is blog. Come over to appearance and themes, and we can see that we're using the 2024 theme that's built in. And if we take a look on the front end, this is what it looks like. We've got a basic header, a very basic footer, our content over there. If we take a look at the blog page, it's got some general information here. And then below that, it's got a list of our posts and pagination. So again, very basic, but you get the feeling for what's going on there. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to install that plugin called Create Block Themes. So come over here to the repository and add new plugin. We're going to do create block theme, install, and activate. And now under appearance, we've got create block theme and manage theme fonts. Manage theme fonts is really handy. This is going to let us install Google Fonts or any other kind of fonts that we want to put in here locally. And this is something that eventually is going to get rolled into core WordPress. We're just not quite there yet. So for now, it's a part of this plugin. And then we've got this menu item here that says create block theme. This is a little bit confusing because this actually exists in two different places and has slightly different functionality in each one. Here in the classic admin screen, we get all these options. But if we were to open up the site editor, so let's go ahead and click on that. You can see that we have different options here. We've got options like save changes, export zip, theme info, create theme, and we get some different things here. So it is a little bit confusing that you've got two different things in two different places. If you look in the repository for the theme, you'll see that people are commenting about it and they don't like it. They just haven't done anything about it yet. For our purposes though, we're just going to come over and say create block theme, and we're going to create a blank theme. And I want to call this my demo. I'm not going to bother putting in a screenshot because it'll give me one by default if I don't do that. And then for features, we've got site editor in there. Really what you would want to do is come in and check off any of the features that are in the theme so that it can easily be searched for. But for right now, I'm just going to say generate. And what that's done is it's created my blank theme. If I come over to themes, you can see it right here. It's called my demo, and I can activate that. Now remember, this is what it looked like before. Now that we've got the new theme activated, I can refresh, and you can see it looks much different. It's got an even more generic header, even more generic footer, and you can see that we've got a very generic front page here. If we go to blog, it's a very generic blog page that just has some content of the blog post, some metadata about it, and if it has a image, it'll put the image in there. Let's click over and click on one of these blog posts. And again, this is going to be very basic, where it just has the content of the post in there. If you take a look at the theme folder under WP content that we created when we ran the plugin, we'll see these files. Under there, we've got a readme.txt, and in this file, we can put whatever we want in here, just some general information about what the theme is and how it works. We've got our generic screenshot.ping. We've got a style.css, and this is one of the critical files that defines everything. A theme.json, which we'll get into much later, and this has some basic information in there by default. We'll cover this more when we create the theme by hand. And then we've got two other directories. We've got one called parts, and that has our header and our footer. And then we have templates that has our index.html template. Now, if we look at these HTML files, you can see that these things look nothing like regular HTML. This is WordPress markup, basically. It does use HTML for its main structure, so we can see things in here like our general elements, but then scattered in there, we have all these different comments that tell WordPress what to do. So now what do we do with this? Well, let's come over to the site editor. We can just click on Edit Site, or we can come over from the dashboard and do Appearance, Editor. They both take us to the same place. And now we're going to start customizing this theme. So before we start making any changes, let's take a look at what's already in place. I'm going to click on Navigation, and we can see that we've got this menu called Social Menu. That's what we have right up there. This probably isn't the one that we're going to use, so when we edit the menu, we'll add a new one. So if I wanted to, I could delete this, I could duplicate it, rename it. If I come over to Styles, we can see, I can click on this little eye over here to see the style book. And now we can see the basic styles that are installed by default. And these are basic WordPress styles. This isn't anything that's included as part of the theme because it is a blank theme. So these are very, very basic styles that WordPress gives you by default. Typography, nothing's changed in there. Colors, this is just our default color palette, along with our gradient palette and duotone palette. And then for layout, we can see that we've got a basic content layout and wide layout there with no padding anywhere and a block spacing of 24 pixels. If we come down to the blocks, we can see the styling for each of the blocks. None of these have really been changed. These are all the default ones that are built into WordPress. But it is kind of interesting to go through this list because you can click on any of these and set the defaults for any of these blocks. We'll get into all that a little bit later as well. Let's go back out to the site editor. Here we've got under pages, this is a list of all those pages that were pre-populated. So again, WordPress is trying to move away from that classic admin screen and move everything here into the site editor. They're not there yet, but that's what they're working towards. I'm going to skip over templates for right now. Also, if we look at this, it says looking for template parts, find them under patterns. And that's because a thing called template parts, which we'll get into later again, used to be a separate item here inside the site editor. Now it's gotten rolled into patterns. The goal is to make everything a pattern, whether that's going to be a synced pattern, an unsynced pattern, or a partially synced pattern. But again, that is a work in progress, so they're kind of doing that in phases. But when we look under patterns, we can see that we've got two patterns set. We have one for header, and then our footer is very basic. And down in here, we can see that manage all my patterns. And this brings us to the classic pattern editor. And if we say manage all template parts, we've got the one that's in the site editor. And again, I don't know why it's so inconsistent, but like I said before, WordPress is very inconsistent. So now that we've taken a look at what we have there in terms of patterns, pages, styles, navigation, let's come into templates. And we have one template that's here by default, and that's our index template. That's because WordPress does need an index template to run. Really, there's only two files that you need for a theme, and that is a style.css that gives you the basic information about what the theme is, and you need a index template. So we're going to click on this index template to get the basic information about what it is. So what this is it says, my blog title is called a blog page, how many posts per page, header, footer, areas, and then this is the edit button. Before we come in and actually start editing this, I want to introduce you to the WordPress template hierarchy. And this diagram, although it looks a little bit confusing, actually helps you understand what WordPress does under the hood and how templates are applied. So what this is saying is that if no other template exists, it's going to apply the index template to everything. It's going to apply it to posts, to pages, to your front page, to your archive pages, to everything. However, once you start adding other templates in there, they get applied to those other kinds of pages. So if I want to create a template for my posts, I would use a single template and call it, in this case, it would be single.php, but in the block theme world, it would be single.html. And that would apply to all my single posts. If I wanted one for my pages, I would create one called page, and that would apply to any static pages. If I want a different template for my homepage, I would create a template called frontpage.php or frontpage.html. If I wanted a 404 page template, I would create a 404 one. If I wanted a template for my search results, I would create one called search. So a lot of these are the ones that we're going to be creating as we go through these different tutorials. But I wanted to show you this diagram because this is probably one of the most important concepts that you can understand when you're creating themes for WordPress. Looking at this, you can even understand how to create templates that apply to specific taxonomies or specific post types. So now that we've looked at that, let's come back over here to the site editor, and we're going to edit our index template. Now, if I open up our list view, we can see that we have our header. This is our template part, our footer template part. And under header, we've got our site logo, and then a group for our title and tagline. And then we have our navigation. Under footer is very basic. We just have a group and a paragraph in there. And for the meat of the template, we have a query loop. And this is what's going to show us all the different posts that are part of the site. So it's going to loop through this post template, and it's going to show us the title, featured image, content if it exists, and then it's going to have a row with some meta information about the post. And then at the bottom, we're going to have our pagination. So now you might be wondering why I have this query loop in the index template, but we're actually seeing the front page template here. And if we go to any other page or post, we see the contents. Well, if we come back to the template and take a look, it is still showing us that stuff. It's just that the query loop is only showing us the context for the type of post that we're in. So right now we're showing this post, which means that it's only going to show us the contents of that specific post. And it is showing us exactly what it is that we think we should see. So we're seeing the title. We've got that title here. We don't have a featured image for this one. We've got that content. And of course, we're seeing the content in there. And then we've got the row with our author, date, categories, and tags. And that we have right down there. Because it's not an archive type page, we're not going to see any of the pagination. and then we go straight into the footer. But now let's take a quick peek here, and we're just going to do an inspect on the page. And you can see that we actually have that div for the pagination. So if that pagination was there, we'd be seeing it. So this is our super basic theme, and we're going to modify this just a little bit so that we can get a better feeling for what's going on. So we've got this index template. This is going to be our fallback that happens regardless of anything else. However, I want to create a different template for my posts. So let's come into templates, and we're going to say add new template. And here's where we can pick different templates. Again, coming back to this hierarchy, we're going to see a lot of the same stuff over here in the site editor now. So I'm going to start off by saying single post because I want this to be a single post template. And we're not going to choose a pattern. This would just let me copy over the pattern from the index template. We're not going to do that. We're just going to say skip. And we'll come in here to the list view. We're going to start off by adding our header and footer. So we will come over to our blocks. And we can see that we've got template parts already for that header and footer. So I could either say template part to choose an existing one or start a blank one. And if I choose, we can see those existing header and footer. Or let's delete this. Okay. If we come back to blocks, any template parts that we've created already end up in here. So I'm going to say header, and let's add the footer. And then the other thing that I want to do is in between them, I want to add a group. And this is just going to be a general group here. So let's move this up. So we've got header, group, and footer. And in this group, I just want to create a content block. Now here's the general pattern that you're going to use whenever you're creating content inside of the block editor. You're generally going to start with a group block, and in there you either want a row or a stacked. That's going to give you your typical container and then inner container setup. And in here, I want to say my group is going to have inner blocks use content width. That content width, I want it to be wide width. So it's going to go across the entire content width that I specified. And then inside that row block, I want content. And now I want to create a row that says previous post and next post. So I'm going to create one. I'll look for my columns. I'll add 2 columns. Here we'll go previous. And in the second column, we'll add the block for next. And I'm going to align that right. And this one is aligned left. And this whole columns block, I want to make this wide width so it goes across the entire area, the entire content area, not just the smaller content width. We want to save that. We now have a single post template that's been saved. And if we come in, this is a post. We're going to refresh that. And we can now see that we've got our content as well as our previous and next buttons. So now we're using that post template that we created here. I want to do a similar thing for page templates, only this time I'm going to do it without the columns. So rather than reinvent the wheel, I'm just going to select all this, say copy blocks. And now we'll come back here to templates and we will create a new template. And this is going to be for pages. And this is going to be for all pages, not just a specific page. We're not going to start with a pattern. I'm going to come in here and show my list view. And we will just Control V to paste that in right there. I've got our group with my row and my column. And I'm just going to delete this column because I don't need the pagination for my pages. Although looking at it, you know what? I probably should have done a row for our title. So let's go ahead and do that now. Put in a row. Add my title. And I want to put this row and I put it right there above the content. There we go. And I want to make that row wide width. Save. Done. Now let's come over. I want to change that post. So instead of going back out each time, I can click on this little guy here and open up my single post template. And I can do the same thing. Okay, there we go. So now on this post, I've got my title, which I should have made an H1. Boom, there we go, page 1. And let's come in and just show that it's working on a page. And there we have it. So now we've got about the test. This is our page, content, footer with no pagination on posts, title, content, pagination. We'll come back to the front page, and now you can see that it's using my page template instead of the index template. However, if I wanted a different front page, so in a lot of cases, I would want a front page that goes the entire width. So instead of being constrained to the content width, I would actually want it full width because sometimes I would want to put a full width image in there. I could do that as well. So let's go ahead and we will add a new one. We'll add a new template front page. Skip that. And here we're going to add the header. Then we'll add a footer. I'm going to add a group and a row. And now we'll put it all together. Pop that in between there. And then we're going to make this full width. And then in that row, we've got our content. And when we look at the front page, we can see that it is full width. This time I definitely do not want a title because again, I would generally put the title in as part of the content of the front page. So this is a little bit more like what we would do with a front page template and why we might want a separate front page template from our normal page templates. That index template that we created works great for our blogs. Let's take a look and see what happens when we look at some of our categories. So works fine for our categories. But you know, one of the things that I don't like is it's showing all the information in there. So let's create a separate archive template. I'll keep the fallback index.html the way that it is. There's nothing wrong with that. So this time we're going to come in and we're just going to say all archives. And here again, we're going to skip that pattern. I'm going to add my header and a footer. We'll take a look at what we have in there. And now I'm going to use one of these built-in patterns. And we're going to use posts, images at left. So you can see that it added the query loop there. I'm going to put that inside of a group. So let's add a group block. We'll pop that query loop inside our group block. Put it right in there. Because what that's going to let us do is tell it to use that content width. And now I can come in and make this our wide width. So now when I refresh this, we're going to get the new template. I probably want to add a title in here as well. So we'll do a row. And we're going to make this wide width. And in that row template, we're going to use archive title. So now we can see that it's category classic. And when I manually put in a search query, we can see that it is not using that template. It's because search results, again, coming back to this, searches need their own template. They do not use the standard archive template. Same thing for the blog page. The blog page does not use the general archive template. So if I wanted a blog index page that's going to be different from my index, I would need to create one of those as well. For our purposes, though, we're going to leave that as is because I've already shown you how to go about creating templates and the general way that they work. So in its most basic form, that's what you're looking at with templates. We're looking at creating the structure of the template, the files there, and then you're just going into themes, site editor, and creating the templates for the different types of content that you need to show. Of course, there's a lot more to it than this, but hopefully that gives you a taste of what we're going to be covering over the next few lessons as well. Thank you so much for sticking with me in this video. In the next one, we're going to cover a little groundwork to set the stage for building a block theme that will be flexible enough for our projects. Then we'll dive right in and build the theme files and the key templates. If you found this video helpful, please hit that like and subscribe button or leave a comment below. I love hearing from all of you, answering your questions and sharing ideas. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.